Captain Ron here.
Corey?
Hey, so we're going to talk today about negotiating counteroffers and everything we're kind of seeing in the real estate market. If you're a new agent or a new buyer, even a seller, I guess, or buyer, this is going to help you out because right now what I'm seeing is, at least number one, is a lot of agents aren't countering offering or negotiating. They are just literally walking away from the deal. Now, it may have some part to do with their buyer just wanting to walk away or their seller not even wanting to negotiate, but mostly I'm seeing it on the buyer side. And then two, with the counter offers with buyers or agents right now, I'm just not seeing anybody even asking. If they think it's priced too high, they're not even sending an offer over. Now, as a listing agent, you can't legally tell anybody, well, I know this is what the seller is going to do. But it doesn't mean that not send an offer over. Try negotiating. I had one where it was listed at 750. The buyers came out of nowhere and said, hey, we want to offer 550. The sellers took it. I had no clue they would take it. They said, yeah, we'll take it. We were just trying higher. $200,000 difference, and at least they asked. So that's what I'm starting to see, and I'm assuming the same.
Yeah, with the prices, like weekly, the market seems to adjust. So we're always, trying to keep up with what that market's doing. And so there is a probability or a chance that we're going to have a home that is overpriced. And yeah, I just experience from both seller and buyer side. It's the buyers feel like they're going to offend the seller if they offer low. Of course, I advise them like, hey, you can make an offer and all they can say is no, or they can counter back and say, sure, we'll take that, or how about this? But nobody seems to want to do that. But I don't know if it's just purely in fear of offending the seller. But I mean, if you don't try, you're never going to get it. And as far as on the seller side, if the home is not getting any offers, usually that's a pretty good indication that it's priced too high. And
Price reduction.
So price reduction and there's real estate. There's negotiating. There's always negotiating, and it just seems like that folks are kind of going away from that, which I don't know how that is even going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, you got to negotiate in a deal, and
I don't know why. We were just talking about that earlier. That's why we're making this video. Is I've had two deals right now where the buyers just walked away and the agents didn't even negotiate. So I'm not sure. And I asked the agent later, and one of them says, oh yeah, I guess I could go back and talk to the buyer about that. And my thought process is, why wouldn't you have already done that? Like, if we're counter offering you, go back to the buyer and say, hey, well, let's go ahead and do this. Let's try to keep it moving forward. So either it's an inexperience or lack from the buyer's agent, or the buyers are just wanting to walk away. They're either not committed or they've just had enough. But that agent, the buyer's agent, either says, hey, we can still negotiate this. We can come back and say this. You're not going to piss us off. Or even easier, call that agent, call a listing agent and say, hey, you know what? My buyers are thinking of walking away. Do we have any room to negotiate? If we send over another counter offer, do you think they'd be acceptable to it? Depending on how that listing agent can act, sometimes they can be complete ASSs, I get it. But most of the time they're going to say, yeah, send over a counter offer, we'll look. Unless they completely say, well, no, we're not going to look at anything. Then you can go back to your buyers and tell them that. But at least you've kept that conversation going instead of just texting. Both of them were text, by the way. They're like, no, I think we're just going to walk away. And I'm like, my mind's blown. Like, I mean, maybe I should animate this. When did we stop negotiating is beyond me.
yeah, I don't know. One of my recent listings, the buyers that were in there, they had their inspection and they just came back and said, we're gonna back out due to things that we found on there. I'm like,
oh, was it a crazy inspection?
No.
That's the first thing.
No, it wasn't. and I'm like, well, okay, but why? And this was through email at first. And so then I just picked up the phone and I said, hey, what is it that you guys want? Try to send us a counter. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess we can try that. So we kept the deal together. That's
good for you, at least calling. Yeah. Isn't it amazing you had to call?
But it was like, why not even try? Like, all we could say is no. And there was nothing, nobody wanted to try. And had they have just submitted a counter to us, we wouldn't have had to have that conversation about, well, we're going to back out.
So I think it brings 2 points up to this and off of your thing. One, I think lack of experience from agents. Huge. I mean, we have a lot of new agents. They just don't know how to counter. A lot of it's text or email. And I'm like, pick up the phone. Now, it's crazy that we're saying this, but pick up the phone and talk to the agent.
And don't get me wrong, I like to text and email too, but
So do I.
there's a point that you have to be like, hey.
Not at key points, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. You can tell I'm passionate. Corey's a little nicer about it. Pick up the phone. If it's a key point and the deal's about to go sideways, call the agent. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's true though. If you're wanting to just throw in the towel, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, real estate is about negotiating. So,
well, the second thing I was going to say is maybe this is a new negotiating strategy. You say, hey, you send a text or email and be like, hey, we're going to cancel. The seller panics and says, well, no, let's counter back. We'll keep it together. I mean, although
I guess it could be, yeah.
I had my other seller that says, well, screw it. We'll let them go. You know, that I love that when the sellers say that. Fine, if they can't even negotiate, they can't pick up the phone, then let them go. One means they probably don't want it, and that's my third point with this on that subject is this market is so weird right now. If the buyers aren't committed 100%, and I'm seeing a lot of flaky buyers, they just don't know what they want. They finally get the deal under contract, then maybe they see how much the mortgage is, and it's like, oh wait, we can't afford that payment, even though they're pre-approved. It kind of sinks in. They back up. I'm seeing a lot of flakiness or indecisiveness on the buyer's side. The sellers want to sell, but the buyers, I think, with the whole climate of economy and interest rates supposed to go back up, and then, you know, Zillow's saying prices are supposed to be up 6 to 7% next year. Do we buy now? Maybe we don't want to move. I'm seeing it all over the board of weirdness, I guess, is a nice way to say it, and maybe that has to go into hand with maybe the buyer's agent isn't experienced. They're just like, no, buyer's done. Sorry, I got to cancel. And we've all had that. We've all been there. But at least I think communication is...
I literally just, our last offer was that exact scenario. The buyers love the house and then submitted the offer, and then I get a call like, well, my other half really doesn't love it. So what do we have to do to get out of this? I'm like, well, we just call them and say we're out. So, I mean, that's a difference. There was no negotiating because we had just submitted the offer. So there was nothing, nobody had accepted an offer or anything like that. It was just like we wrote the offer and sent it out, and then they're like, never mind.
Changed your mind. Yep. Yeah, I had one of those too with an investor. Investor's like, actually, I have too many projects. I don't want this one. And we did a rescission. There was no negotiating. I guess the moral of the story is, our whole point with this is, one, if you're not going to negotiate, then why are you in real estate? Because it is, like Corey keeps saying, it's negotiating. So if you come back and have to go forth, now it doesn't mean that buyer, that doesn't mean that seller is going to cave and you negotiate it, but at least keep the conversation alive. If you guys can't meet eye to eye when negotiating, then the deal is done. But at least you tried and tried to negotiate it. Some points in some negotiations, you won't meet eye to eye and it never will come to fruition, but at least you tried. Don't just walk away.
And some agents, which again is not necessarily my style, but some agents will just say, put it in writing, and instead of having that conversation of like trying to figure out a middle ground.
Yeah.
And
I've heard that a lot too.
That's fine too, but just knowing that the paperwork and how it flows, you can really limit things if you start. I mean, yes, ultimately you want to have it in a paper.
Well, it's going to be in writing eventually, yes.
But why not try to hash things out and get an understanding for both sides and where things are at?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And so I like to do verbals too. I ask my seller, hey, do you mind if I do verbal negotiation, with the buyer's agent, and we can figure it out. It saves time, back and forth. Hey, this is what they said. Now, it does sometimes bite you. And I know why some agents say put it in writing, because I'll do a verbal, get it negotiated, and then I'll never see the paperwork. Or then I, as a seller, even have to sometimes send the counter and say, all right, fine, here's the counter, if they've sent the offer, and then they don't sign it. So I put it in writing because it does have a lot more meaning when it's in writing, but I'd like to do verbal negotiations too. Like, hey, where are we at? What's going on? Okay, this or that, fine, then let's go that direction, done. And I go back and forth. The seller saves a lot of time. We get the deal negotiated in, depending if they're both available, half a day, an hour that day, and then yes, we can send the paperwork that evening, get it DocuSign, hopefully the party signs and docu signs, and then you're done.
Most of my best experiences with transactions have been with other agents who are willing to talk
Communicate. Yeah.
to me and about what we're doing and getting the best for our clients where we all feel good about it.
Being no peacock chest.
Yeah, the ego and the
Peacock chest.
and wanting to just be that person's like, I don't want to talk, put it on paper.
Yeah.
That doesn't typically go well.
Yeah. And it's we're trying to communicate. So it's not just being rude. We understand on paper. And yes, it ultimately will be on paper because what our seller is saying. Now, if they want it, fine. I'm still going to call. So if you call me and say, put it on paper, I'm still going to call and pick your brain and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Will this work? What do you think? And if all you say is put it on paper, I have to go back to my buyers and say, they're giving me no information. All they're saying is put it on paper. We're out here trying to guess. We're always going to come lower than what you could negotiate it up higher, is in my opinion. Because if you give me information, I can go back and say, hey, this is where they're at. This is where they're wanting. Otherwise, I'm guessing, and guess what? If I'm a buyer and the buyer's agent and I'm telling them, we're always guessing lower. We're always going to put it lower. And then we have to go back and forth, instead of just trying to meet in that medium. And maybe some people like playing the game. Maybe that's part of it.
Well,
to build it up.
And legally, the flow of paperwork, you can only go back and forth so much until the offer's dead.
Yeah, and timelines and everything.
And then you got to start it all over again if you choose to do so. And I have had clients where they had kept coming back to a specific house and the seller was like not wanting to talk or budge, and it's like, how do we get to where we where we all want to be if there's no communication? So it's tough.
Yeah. Well, I would say, so new agents or agents that aren't communicating, negotiate. And it brings us back to the main second point is, if you see a home that's overpriced, put an offer on it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I run around with best friend. He'd shoot back in the day, 100,000 K under a price. I still remember that home. And then the seller came back and I think it was $1,000 off. This was like 10 years ago. So we offered 100K under. They came back down $100,000. And obviously we didn't meet on that deal, in that home, and we found a different one. But we were running back, even when the market was okay, we were lowballing some of the homes. So it doesn't mean just completely blanket lowball if you're trying to win, but it means, okay, if that home's priced here, let's educate, let's take a guess. You can do your own comps and say, this is where I think it should be. Let's write that offer. Now, if you come back up and go this way, but at least you're meeting with an educated guess if you think it's priced high. Some aren't pricing them high, and they're getting bidding wars. That's more my strategy, is price it right on par, get that listing going, and then get a bidding war. If you try to price it high and you start ticking it down, it just looks worse as you tick it down. Now, sometimes it pays off. I've had clients price it high, get an offer, get it pending, and then go to closing, and they nailed it. And it's almost better than what they would have got for a bidding war. There is a caveat to that, though. If it doesn't go pending, or worst case scenario, it goes pending and then people cancel, it's almost like the kiss of death, because now you're down lowering after it went pending. It makes it look like something went wrong with the house.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had some of those.
Oh, just, recently.
Hey, really?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was a tough situation. I mean, a lot of different scenarios that came into play with this particular house. It wasn't your standard scenario. I mean, the person had only owned it for a few months and wanted to sell it. So that was just one of the scenarios, that made it hard. But again, it all comes back to the negotiating, and that's just what we were not getting. And that was the same house that the buyers were like, well, we're just going to back out. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, let's talk about this. Can we hold this together if we can come to a middle ground? And we did keep it together. So
good.
But it was, there was a bunch of other stuff that went along with it too.
It's amazing what communication does. That's why Corey's here. Amazing. But that's the whole point of this. So again, I guess to summarize, communicate, negotiate, put offers out there if you are serious about buying, and actually go forward with the deal. Don't just throw stuff out there and expect it to stick if you don't put any work behind it. If there's no work behind it, the other listing agent's not going to try to work either, or at least we try. I'm still trying with some of these other buyers, and I'm like, when I'm the listing agent, I'm like, let's go. What do we need? Oh yeah, I guess I should negotiate with the buyer. Yeah. Like, unbelievable. In a nice way.
Yeah.
I say that all in a nice way. It's all love here.
Yeah, it's just a strange, just like the market itself has changed. It's the communication has changed, is changing, and don't really see it for the better. But again, who knows?
We sound like old timers now, don't we?
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
I like change, but
Who would have thought, Corey and I, we like change, we like technology. We were just chatting about AI and, oh my goodness, keywords and everything else, and so we love it. But I think I'm always going to I'll keep communication as my number one thing. I'll always pick up the phone. I like text, don't get me wrong, I can text a million miles a minute, as long as it's communicating. But if it's a text that says, hey, we're going to cancel, have a good day, I'm like, well,
yeah,
let's...
because you can't get the same inflection and all that out of a text that you can as in a conversation, and so many times things get lost in text or in translation of text or email, and so personally, I think picking up the phone and having that conversation of, like, you know, genuinely talking to somebody and saying, hey, you know, this, let's try to keep this together.
Yeah.
And our light just went out, so it must be time to
wrap it up. Well, Corey's right, though. Pick up the phone. I always give my buyers and sellers a preface of, hey, if it comes off rude, it's not meant to be rude. It's just straightforward information via text or email. If you want to call me, because I don't want you to think I'm being rude. It's just, I don't want to take a lot of time to say, hey, here's what's going on. Now with the clients, the buyers agents and listing agents, I will take time and explain what's going on if I am texting. But I'm with you. I pick up the phone. I call.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Captain Ron here. Have a good day.
Take care.